Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery.
Hello, my name is Melina Adair, and welcome to the 5th episode of Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery. I'm a substance abuse counselor with Tarzana Treatment Centers, and today I want to talk about a few important aspects when looking at the disease of addiction and how it's impacting our community. One of the words that I got stuck on over thinking about this over the last few days before beginning this project was the word hope. And when I think to myself of a moment in my life when I was truly hopeless, which was about 12, 13 years ago. During that journey, I didn't realize what my future held or where I would be right here and right now. When I was hopeless, I could only think about one thing, and where was my next fix? Where was my next high? Where was my next drink? And when I was finally able to find that hope within my life, what it really truly meant to me as a person in recovery. Today, I also welcome with us Mr. Devin Smith. Hello, Devin. Welcome.
Hello. Right, thank you.
Devin is also a substance abuse counselor. We work along together.
Yeah. So
I appreciate you doing this with us.
Of course.
Now, what I want to focus on with our conversation here is just looking at substance abuse within the veterans community. So I was hoping maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background with the veterans community as well as with your own background with substance abuse.
Hey, thank you, Melina, for inviting me. I'm Devin Smith. I'm with Tarzana Treatment Centers for over 10 years. I'm also honorably discharged veteran. I'm also in the program. I have over 20 years of sobriety.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hope is a beautiful word, you know, and I try to instill that to our patient population at every opportunity. One of the things that I really appreciate working in Tarzana Treatment Centers is that we meet the patients where they're at.
Yeah.
You know, exactly where they're at. A lot of patients come with a lot of trauma, you know, a lot of loss and heartache. And we have to be truly empathetic in our treatment approaches, you know, and we all use evidence-based practices to meet this tremendous need.
Yes.
You know, especially with our veteran population, coming with combat-related illnesses and trauma, you know, and trying to use a substance as a ways to cope with that pain in which they've experienced by losing loved ones on the battlefield and coming back and not really fitting in any longer.
Right.
You know, and one of the best things I really love about Tarzana Treatment Centers is the aspect that we have time to actually meet with the patients, not just for our hour sessions, but, you know, throughout the course of the day as we're walking around and going to our facilitating our various groups. You know, I always stop and check in with them, especially when I see one looking a certain way. You know, you recognize that as we pass them in the hallways. And I try to at least stop and engage, you know, and look them in the eye. A lot of times we can be rushed, but I've kind of trained myself to, if I'm being called by one of our patients, to stop and focus and listen and engage. Yeah. You know, very rarely will I tell them I don't have time or could you come back later. I try to make that time to engage with that patient. Sure. Because my primary concern is to try to forge a therapeutic alliance.
Correct.
You know?
Yes, I do know. Thank you for that. Now, you mentioned earlier when it comes to veterans and dealing with trauma, I think it's a huge aspect because PTSD, I think, is one of the most reported struggles, I think, when it comes to veterans. As I know for my experience, I was not a wartime veteran, it was during peacetime, but I do remember going through the fact that and what we were actually doing during that peacetime. And there wasn't a lot, there was a lot of drinking. I feel like there was a lot of, I think I learned how to drink when I was in the Army, because that's what we look forward to. That's you know, everything like everything got to the point was, well, what are we doing next? Oh, we're doing, you know, class 6, let's go there. Let's pick up our stuff and let's go. But going back to the trauma conversation and PTSD is to know that according to the VA, the Veteran Affairs, that there is more than 2 out of 10 veterans that struggle with PTSD have substance abuse disorders. Yes. So, you know, tell me a little bit about.
Well, one of the reasons why that is because they're looking for ways to cope. Yeah. You know, and a lot of times the veteran has been reintegrated back into the United States. His or her veteran military career is now over. And what they really miss is the camaraderie.
Yes,
The
I remember that. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
The team aspect of it.
For sure.
Now they're alone,
Yeah.
by themselves, And that's why I really promote to build a sober support system with you. And each and every veteran hospital will offer that support. We have veteran 12-step meetings, key towards instilling that sense of fellowship and camaraderie again, and to teach them to reach out. And it's okay to hurt, it's okay to cry.
It's okay to not be okay sometimes.
Yeah, it's okay to be mad or upset, but also teach them coping skills on how to better process this without the ravaging effect of active addiction.
Sure. And it's important to recognize that Tarzana Treatment Centers is also connectly involved with and contracted through. We do a lot of services with the VA and TRICARE and stuff like that. So it's important for, I think, our viewers to know to reach out to us if they're in need of those types of services. What are some of the challenges that you face as far as when it was time for you to get help?
Showing up.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of false male bravado. I don't need help. I can do this.
Yeah.
And once I got over that hurdle, I went through my treatment at the West LA VA on Wilshire. Beautiful organization, saved my life. Saved my life. And every year I go back and I walk the wards and still engage with the veterans.
Yeah.
One thing about Tarzana Treatment Centers, what they allowed us veterans to do, like on Veterans Day and Memorial Day, we'd fill up a van, with patients, and sometimes the patient wasn't even a veteran. But Dr. Stan allowed us to walk the wards and engage with the veterans that are there, going through treatment. Each and every patient, they really appreciated that experience and they've never forgotten it.
Yeah. I think that it could be very influential for that, for sure. So can you tell me a little bit about how your experience as a veteran, you personally, has intertwined with your substance abuse?
Well, I went to the Army when I was very young, 16 and a half.
Wow, yeah.
My grandparents, they thought that was going to be something that would change my life and make a man out of me.
Yeah.
And help me with my drinking problem, because I had a drinking problem at that age.
Sure.
But, there's a culture of alcoholism in the military. And it's not all about that. It's about the choices that we make when we're there.
Yeah.
And so I made some really poor choices, and I drank a lot.
Yeah.
And I paid the price for that, but I don't look at it as failure. I look at it as just a part of my journey.
Yeah.
I've been clean and sober now for over 20 years.
Congratulations on that. That's amazing.
And my journey began at the VA.
Yeah.
And the services that the VA allows for veterans is top notch. Yeah. I've never had an issue, with my care.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to become a substance abuse counselor. And Tarzana was just a beautiful organization to help me do that.
Yeah.
I started as a driver at Tarzana. Dr. Stan hired me as a driver.
Yeah. And
I went through the Tech 1 and the Tech 2 and went to Pierce College, and he gave me an opportunity to counsel.
Yeah.
For which I'll be forever thankful.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah. Me as well. I think when I look back on my own personal journey in recovery, and I have all these milestones, and I've had some tribulations, of course, like the rest of us, but and everything that led up to where I am at today, I'm also very grateful for the opportunities that Tarzana Treatment Center has offered me to be able to give back to the community and the population that I really truly care so much about, because I think that a lot of people that struggle, that have struggled with the disease of addiction, and who are now working to give that back, because that's something that we're responsible for as people that are working 12-step programs, is that we have to be able to do that. And
I'm glad you brought that up, because a service commitment, which I really push when I facilitate any group that I facilitate, is that service commitment will instill in you a sense of community.
Yeah.
And that's everything for us, a sense of community. We're not in this alone. We have one another.
No.
We can rely on one another.
Yeah.
And if you need to, we can call one another.
Yeah.
And reach out to one another.
Right.
Help one another. We need the help of one another.
Yeah. Kind of like right now.
Yeah.
you know. Devin was nice enough to help me out with making sure that that we get here and we do this project and we're able to convey the best message, utilizing our two stories for sure. Now, you mentioned earlier that you did join the Army at a young age, at 16 and a half. Was that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And for me, I can remember when I made the decision, because I knew I was not college material. I still had a lot of growing to do. I was actually, I was 19 and I hadn't even graduated yet, because I was a fifth year senior due to some choices during my high school years. But
been there, done that.
So, and I knew that I needed to do something for myself, and I couldn't stay where I was. My mom had just remarried, and my stepdad and I kind of weren't like, we got along, but we learned early on that we couldn't live under the same roof with each other. And I knew that I had to make a choice. And I remember sitting in the recruiter's offices like every day of the week, and until I finally walked in and said, let's do this. And I was actually signed up before I actually got my diploma. Okay. And I was in the reserves, so I kind of regret not doing active duty at the time, but I was blessed in the fact that my term was up in 2001.
How many years did you do all of that?
I did 6 years. 6 years in the Army Reserve. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
6 on, 2 off. So they have those 2 years of inactive. So and when 9/11 happened, I remember I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified, because I think they kind of almost did a disservice to us who were in the military during the peacetime, that it wasn't just fun and games.
No.
You know what I mean? There was some serious stuff going on. Yeah, exactly. So, so my heart will always be with those two communities, as far as being a veteran ourselves and in the substance abuse. I think that there's so many things, and it was shocking when I was doing some research, that there's still not a lot of studies in relation to the connection between substance abuse and the veteran community. Even with SAMHSA and things like that, it's been several years since they've actually collaborated and done anything. And the last time they did do a study, they said that almost 30% of veterans seeking SUD services also had PTSD. So I think that this is another avenue that we really need to put, and even when we're dealing with PTSD, it doesn't necessarily have to be due to combat. Me personally, I've been through a lot traumatically, a lot of natural disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, and there's there's a lot of things that I personally that had created these traumatic experiences that we also, I think, need to think about. So, but yeah, that and having that and plugging in that trauma informed care is really have to be, I think, top notch when we are looking at our population, because when we're looking at PTSD, we're looking at the co-occurring disorders, which I know that they talked about on a previous episode, and we're looking at it collaboratively, and I think that the guest on that time did a really good job of explaining and breaking down the different disorders and things like that. And when we're looking at trauma and everything that's connected to that, we have to take a lot more, I think, under consideration when we work with this population. So, yes. What does it mean to you to be a veteran?
I'm proud to be a veteran.
You as well. Yeah.
Proud to be. I did 4 active and 2 inactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really like to work with our veteran population at Tarzana. I really try to instill in our veteran population that same camaraderie and that same community that you had as you served. You could also get that through the 12-step modality.
Yes.
Which Tarzana promotes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an evidence-based practice. It works.
It does. I agree.
And so you can have that same camaraderie there in that 12-step modality.
For sure. Yeah, I do. I know that when I was in the worst of my experience and my disease, I started with opiates and then transitioned to severe alcoholism until August 17th of 2007 as when I went to ICU and almost died. And I spent a lot of time, like when I moved away and I found recovery and I found myself and I realized within myself what I needed to do to make better choices and work on this and not just be somebody that was just coasting through life just because I feel like I'd lived my whole life doing the bare minimum and going above and beyond for myself. It was just, it was just an overwhelming freedom that I experienced.
Yes.
I think from that, and I think there's a lot like, and the whole point to me saying that was that one of the things that clicked, I remember in my head, was that I was sitting in a 12-step meeting, and it just dawned on me like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the only one that went through that.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not the only one that burnt holes in my pajama pants. I wasn't the only one that was going through this. Like, because I can remember those years of just being like, just depressed and hopeless, and just feeling like this was my life. This was going to be my life. Just wrap your head around it. If you live to be, I think I was in my early 30s at the time. If you live to be 40, hallelujah.
And
and
we're not in this alone.
Yeah. Now I made it. I just recently turned 47. So clearly I passed the 40. And then, by the grace of God and 12-step program, I was actually able to celebrate 13 years this past November. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So I know that, and I think that I don't know about you, but I really try to instill in with our patients the importance of not doing this alone.
Exactly. Over and over again.
Over and over again.
We have to repeat it.
Yeah.
A sense of community.
Yeah.
And togetherness.
Yeah.
And they're not in this alone. And Tarzana offers a wonderful mentorship program. Like Dr. Mike, he's also a veteran. And he mentored me, when I became into the counseling field.
Yeah.
And it's just a sense of camaraderie and community, giving back and supporting one another in our fields.
Yes.
Because we don't know everything. But to be able to talk to someone who's been in this for years, get his insight, his various approaches.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
It is. I found my recovery. I was living in another state. I moved to Missouri, and it's so much different out there. And it was just being able to learn that in a smaller community, I think was a blessing for me. I do well sometimes in a smaller atmosphere with smaller, not so much chaos and things happening. And I can just remember, like, there's so many things that I had to adjust to, but they gave me these opportunities, and I can remember, like, what does my future look like? Once I got solid in my recovery, and I knew, like, what does my future look like? And, it's a common thing that we hear people, even patients and other people, I'm going to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I'm going to be a drug and alcohol counselor. They say that often. And I didn't want to be part of that cliche, but at the same time, I want to be a drug and alcohol counselor. And in the state of Missouri, it works very differently because you have to have a master's degree, which I'm grateful. So, and I had to wait for the right timing to be like, I'm going to go back to school. I was working in restaurants, and it was miserable work. And I was just like, and I learned, and I think something that we all have to learn is that faith without works is dead. So if we don't put in that footwork, if we don't do our part, nothing's. And I think I try my best anyway to teach that to our patients, and knowing that it's going to be more than just coming and hanging out with us for 60, 90, 120 days in treatment, and then doing intensive outpatient and things like that. That it's going to be work.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, the work is worth it.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
It's transformative.
So yes.
And to offer hope.
Yeah, for sure.
Tarzana Treatment Centers offers a wonderful bridge RBH program.
Yes. Yes. And I think
recovery bridge program.
Yeah.
And what that is, it's also a safe environment in which to transition to. That's also managed and monitored.
Yeah.
With random drug and alcohol screens.
Sure.
But it gives them an opportunity to stand up on their 2 feet, because independence means everything.
Yes.
Especially to a veteran.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you very much, Devin. Devin's going to continue with us. We're going to take a short break, and we are going to be right back. I would now like to introduce a second guest. His name is Glenn Shalom, who's also a substance abuse counselor with Tarzana Treatment Centers. Welcome and thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, Glenn.
Thank you, Melina. I work at the central location for Tarzana Treatment Centers, and I've been there for 5 years. I have 10 years clean and sober. And
congratulations, yeah.
Thank you. I did not go to treatment. I actually went to a 12-step program, and out of a resentment at that first 12-step program I went to, some guy told me to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I was so angry that this person would try to tell me what to do. And I have this thing that Dr. Mike alerted me on is oppositional defiance disorder. Mm-hmm. And I said, some choice words. And then I decided that I would go to one meeting every day for a year, and I would do one of those steps every month, and that I would leave that 12-step program and go back to living my life. And during that process, I went to 463 meetings in 365 days.
Yeah.
So that was that was actually my treatment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And during that whole journey, I started going back to school for something else. And they had an alcohol and substance abuse program at Glendale Community College. And I took a class. And alongside that, I was also, like, the first person that spoke at a meeting was a person that had been in prison and for a long time for a crime that he had committed, and he was such a vastly different person sitting in front of me that he described that committed that crime, that I was super attracted to I could feel this love energy, and I thought, if that guy can change, I can change.
Yeah.
And I made a commitment at that first meeting, H&I, what is H&I?
Yeah.
And I've never been arrested. I'm like tall and off-white, and I've been overlooked for many of my crimes. But, somehow I said, I'm going to go into jails, and I'm going to go to treatment centers, and I'm going to be a part of that.
Sure.
And so my first exposure to Tarzana Treatment Centers was taking H&I panels. I'm in several different programs, and I have brought every single one of those programs to Tarzana Treatment Centers, which then, of course, when I needed an internship,
there you go.
Actually, I didn't have an internship at Tarzana. I just got hired. So
yeah, that's fantastic. And for our viewers, H&I means hospitals and institutions. Which is a program that's provided from different 12-step programs that actually come into facilities such as jails and treatment centers, and to provide that those meeting type atmospheres for those people while they're in treatment. Which
what I really like about the H&I panels is usually a panel, right? 3, 4, 5, 6 individuals. Some male, some female, some gay, some straight. It's all inclusive. Yeah. The patients at Long Beach where we work, they really appreciate the H&I panels because it also gives the patients an opportunity to obtain a sponsor.
Right.
And to hear somebody identify with their struggle. Again, community and camaraderie.
Yeah.
And I think too, what happens is those, the patients get to see people that have had their experience, and they're not me. They're not their counselor. They get to hear a real person talk about, and they're funny.
Yeah, they're funny. They can be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and
I was blown. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. You're forgiven.
Okay. I was blown away like 3 weeks ago. One of my patients who came through the Long Beach program and actually graduated and went into the RVH program, he came back to speak on a panel. It made my day.
Yeah.
In fact, I really shouldn't say this, but I ended a session early because one of the technicians had alerted me that he was here, and he was asking for me.
Yeah.
So I went into the trailer, and there he was sitting there.
Yeah.
Sharing his experience, strength, and hope.
Yeah.
I hugged that man.
Full circle.
Yes, it is. It's a beautiful thing.
It really, really is. And
that's
I think
one of the rewards of working in this field.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. I feel like we thrive off of those one or two that we see during that time. But I know that one of the things that really fueled me, like watching remember the old, the intervention, the show.
Yes.
And I would watch it for a long time, but I found myself not watching it because it was like 95% of bad, and I would watch the whole episode just to watch that 5% at the end to see, did they make it? Are they still successful? And watching it one day fueled me to be like, oh, you know what? I think I want to do that. I think I want to be that person that can come into and not only look at, because I would look at the families gathering together, right, at the end of each episode. Because I think a lot of people forget that this really truly is a family disease. And if we're not looking at it holistically in that fashion, that we can almost set up our patients to, set them up for failure, and understanding and educating the family and things like that. So what are some ways that we can kind of help, you guys think, in collaborating and involving the families and helping them with their loved ones that are struggling with the disease?
Well, one of the things is in our avatar group is family significant other interview.
Yeah.
Where we're mandated to actually reach out to the family members if they want to be involved and if the patient will allow this.
Yeah.
I recently had an initial session with the patient, and the patient had agreed that her daughter be involved. The patient is elderly, and it really helped the patient stay focused.
Yeah.
Because sometimes she would act out, and I would let her speak her piece and speak her mind, and I would meet her where she's at.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? Let's call your daughter and see what your daughter thinks, because she wanted to leave treatment.
Oh, yeah.
We placed that call together, and the doctor was able to talk her down, and to remind her of her commitment to treatment, because now she has grandchildren.
Yeah.
You know, and the daughter wants her to prepare her mother to be a part of her child and the grandchildren's life now.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think, you know, I have two things to say. One is, you know, I had a friend whose son continued to relapse and go from treatment center to treatment center. And I kept suggesting that to my friend that she tried to go to Al-Anon, which is a program for the person that does not use the drug, but is affected by the drug. And finally, after my friend called me so many times about her son relapsing, I finally said to her, how can you ask your son to do what you yourself aren't willing to do? Go to that program, work those steps, and find out your own answers. And she has gotten like clean, you know, off of the addiction that her son has, right? So she's done that. But the other thing that I also try to do with my patients is to right size their expectations of their family members. Because a patient is sitting in front of me, and whether they're there, you know, by their own volition or the nudge of a judge, they are actually actively engaged in their program. And sometimes their expectation that their family member like should be right there with them is false hope. And so trying to manage and work with them to try to right size it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I get asked very often actually is when we look at sponsorship or anything like that, they always ask questions like, oh, well, can my uncle, can my sister, and I always want to reiterate, like, we have to have our family support, but that also needs to be separate from our recovery support. So, and those things, and the same thing I tell with people that are couples that are both struggling with the disease and things like that, that really those needs to be two separate entities. Yours needs to be yours own, because I think we need that, because like for my example with like my mother is like one of my biggest rock support, but she's not my recovery support. That has to be separate. But at the same time, I know that like my stepdad's brother, who unfortunately passed away from the disease a couple years ago, like they struggled with not knowing what to do. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? How do we not enable but help? How do we, because he was infiltrating their relationship and all of this, and being able to understand and set boundaries and the importance of being able to do that. I think that what do we do, right? And I always think that the patient or the person that's in treatment, trying to get them to realize or understand that the family member is just scared. And they don't have the words or the tools or the understanding. And so try to come, like approach it as you would a scared child. How would you deal with that? You know,
a lot of things I try to encourage my patients to do as well, because there's trauma on both sides of this scenario here. You know, you have the grieving parent that just have lost their child. Scared of their child. You know, and one of my patients just last week, he was telling me they always keep bringing up what I did. So I said, okay. So when they do that, what do? I tell them to stop that. I'm not doing that anymore. So I suggested this. I said, let's try this. Allow them to speak. You know, hear them. They're hurting. And the only way they can get over and begin to heal too is to communicate their pain to you. You know, don't shut them down. Don't be dismissive. But accept what they're telling you. Because they have to heal just like you have to heal here. And he said he's tried that on the phone, and they couldn't believe it, that he gave them that space to communicate their hurt and their pain to him. You know, and I think that's a really good tool. I think that would be really, really good for the patients to practice. I also think a contributing factor when looking at that is how that's being communicated, because some of our patients and their family units may be a little more aggressive, and things like that. So they might need a mediator. They might need that middle person to help them collaborate that conversation. And I also do the same thing. We're trying to have them understand, like, they have their resentments as well. They have their hurt. They have their own emotions that's attached to the decisions that we have made.
while they need to understand what they need to do as individuals for themselves, we also need to have an open ears and open mind to be receptive to that, which, to be honest, sometimes our patients aren't great at the beginning. But thanks, you know what I mean, having that support, I think, is crucial to be able to continue with that. But yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head when it comes to people like families, because my father wanted to throw my past in my face.
Yes. My grandfather did the same thing.
But he did it. He was in a very condescending way, and it was just like, well, you remember when you do this? I remember when you do that. I remember, and you know, and that's you know, we don't do that anymore. He doesn't do that anymore. So because we had a hard heart, but you know.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When one of your patients tells them that a family member has said, "Why should we believe you now?" What do you say?
I allow them to first try to separate themselves from that conversation itself. Come back to why you're here. Come back to remembering that, you know, they have their stuff, which is a completely separate from your stuff.
Exactly.
And instead of verbally being apologetic, allow them to see.
Outstanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Let them see it.
It's not about me or the patient talking.
Correct.
Because you've done that a lot.
Right. Exactly.
You've said a lot of things.
Right.
It's about actually
The
showing
action.
Exactly.
and letting
Correct.
them make the decision on their own,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah. So, yeah, and with that, you know, I think relapse prevention is something that is a crucial part, because if you think about it, we're kind of in the business of relapse prevention, right? So, and relapse prevention has really truly become one of my biggest passions. And I can remember in a previous treatment center I worked at, and it was in a smaller community. And I know that, you know, being a smaller community, you would often see the same clients, that's what we refer to them, come back over and over and over again. And as I was talking to them, each and every time I would sit down, because I was like a tech at that place, and I began to see a pattern that was emerging in each one of their stories. And I was like, there's something here, there's something. And, you know, there's a lot that can go into a relapse prevention plan, but sometimes we need a quick reference. Sometimes we need to just be able to say, okay, what is happening in this stage, in this stage, in this stage? Because out of every single one of those conversations, the pattern was the same. And so then I created what I refer to as a tool that I refer to as the Zero to Relapse, which right now we're going to show really quickly on the screen for your viewers. And what it is a very simple tool that allows us, as far as us, as well as teach our patients to understand, first and foremost, you're going to think about using. You're going to think about drinking. It's going to happen. You can't run from that. How can we best prepare you for that? How is our best way to be proactive? So usually I start my conversations off with where you see the zero at, which is a person in recovery. So what does that look like? You know, we know what that looks like, right? Somebody that's actively working for themselves, regardless of what support group they're achieving, and something happens or nothing happens, and they think about using. We talk a lot about in my relapse prevention groups about that thought and about that process and about that urge to drink or use. What's your plan? What are you going to do? And I really instill reaching out for help immediately, as soon as possible. Don't sit on it. Don't sleep on it. Don't try to sleep it away. Don't try to do anything, because I feel like if we're a little more aggressive when it comes to being proactive, I think that they can have a better plan and they can respond to it better. When I went to our outpatient services, I've had patients come back, I used this and it worked because it was simple, it was to the point. And because I know that if we don't, we're gonna go into that obsession stage. And then we all know what that obsession stage looks like. We can't stop thinking about it. We develop that tunnel vision, and that'll quickly turn into planning. Okay, where am I gonna go? What am I gonna do? How am I gonna get my money? We're gonna put that plan into action, and there we go, we're off and running. And I firmly believe, like, if we are able to see that that's the pattern and have them be like, okay, we talked about this is what's happening, this is where I'm at, here's my plan. Tell me about your feelings about that. Either one.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I like to focus on having the patient write down their own plan. You know, I will encourage and try to guide, but the patient will adhere to what they want to do. You know, and I'm big on writing things. You know, write it out.
Yeah.
You know, what you're going to do when this happens.
Yeah.
ID traps and triggers.
Yeah.
You know, one of my big mantras is relapse is not an option.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you may be thinking,
Yeah.
that just cannot be an option at this stage.
Yeah.
Because it brings so much trauma and pain. And I like to bring family members into this relapse prevention plan as well. You
Sure.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of times I remind them that when we relapse, because I've relapsed before.
Sure.
You know, I've been in treatment 4 times.
Yeah.
You know, with the 4th time was the charm.
Yeah.
And we disconnect from our support group.
Yeah.
Ask anybody that's relapsed.
Yeah.
We've disconnected from our support group. We stopped going to meetings. We stopped engaging with our sponsor.
Yeah.
We've let some service commitments drop off.
Sure.
And then that's replaced with that old negative, poor choice making
Sure.
and impulsivity.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. For sure. Absolutely. Thank you.
So I also have patients work on a relapse prevention plan, but I focus mostly on this thing, which I will send both of you guys, called a recovery plan.
Yeah.
And I have not relapsed. I have worked this recovery plan, and especially early in recovery, I did it once a month because I could only commit to every 30 days.
Yeah.
And I was only willing, I didn't think that I wanted to stop drinking alcohol or using weed because those didn't seem like the problem. You know, I have used drugs and alcohol for 35 years. It was crystal meth that brought me down, and I'm so grateful because I wouldn't have changed.
Yeah.
And so this recovery plan thing focuses not just on the actions that I take, it identifies the bottom lines, which are the things that I want to get away from, but it focuses on the actions that I take, which incorporates my recovery, right? Not just drug and alcohol, but going back to school or getting a job or all of these things. And then the visions, really, because what happens for me is when I start to slip into relapse, I don't look at the visions I have for my future.
Right.
I start to put those aside, and people give up things. That's what happens during a relapse. And so focusing on the visions for my future helps me to stay.
Sure. Absolutely. That
connected.
totally makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that making it a top priority, I mean, for me, when I talk about this with my patients, is to become comfortable with reaching out for help.
Yes.
And the solution I brought that goes with Zero to Relapse, we'll show this right now for you really quickly for your viewers, is something very simple, and it's just really, we're going to stop. We're going to stop where we're at, stop what we're doing. We're going to see the problem that we're at. We're going to talk about it versus with, whether it be a mentor or a sponsor or whatever. We need to be open to suggestions that they're providing with us, but with others in the program. And then once it's all over and we kind of are able to decompress, we're going to take a few minutes to process. I think that processing at the end is really important, to just be like, okay, this is what just occurred. This is how I got through it. I did not pick up.
Exactly.
I was able to do that.
Exactly.
So I know that I can do it again in the future. So I think that, because I don't know about you guys, because this pattern that for the Zero to Relapse,
this is on point to me.
It can happen over a matter of weeks. The pattern can happen over a matter of seconds. And I've talked to patients where they had that reservations right out the gate and sat at that, between that thought and obsession stage for a couple of weeks before finally, committing to a plan and then executing that plan. So I had a patient not that long ago that said that he had a bottle hidden for 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
I did that before.
And just understanding,
I mean, in my community, obsession to planning. People go back on apps that they should not be going on. And people start to fantasize. It begins in, like you said, it begins in the mind.
Correct.
It begins in the romantification or romanticizing of whatever happened in the past, and we kind of forfeit our present or future.
Yeah. I know that anytime, like I was leading up to a relapse, and my last one was a doozy because I had been 2 years. I was committed to a 12-step program. I think I went to at least 13 to 14 meetings a week. I mean, I was like when I do something, I do it all the way. You know what I mean? I fought getting there, but once I was in there, I was
Such an
like,
addict.
it was just, yeah, you know what I mean? It was just like full blown. I was just like, because I loved every aspect of it. And then I became too involved in service work, and I didn't have that balance. And I can remember driving to the doctor's office and doing that ping pong match in my head going, should you, shouldn't you, should you, shouldn't you? And I ultimately, at the end of the day, decided, yeah, let's do this. Let's go ahead and give it another shot because I'm sure I can control it this time. And understanding that, you know, we can all get triggered, and we all understand that we can use anything to be a trigger. Like, it could be the weather, it could be, you know, like we say, the shoelace. It could be anything, or it could be a major trigger, or it could be, you know what I mean? I think it's really understand, like, you know, once we break it down and look at those those triggers that are causing that initial thought. And be like, okay, because I know for me, the first time I went to treatment, I was like, okay, I went to rehab, so everything's fine now, right?
I'm fixed.
I'm good to go. There's nothing more I need to do. And I think there's a misconception on the fact that you're still going to think about that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because like that's the misconception. People think that treatment is recovery. Treatment is not recovery.
Correct.
No.
Recovery is something that you do.
Right.
Treatment is something that helps you to get in line, right?
Correct.
To move forward with your life. And it's funny because one of the things that I did is I ended up in, because that all of those meetings I did that first year, I just said I'm going to go to any 12-step meeting. So I went to like SLAA, Al-Anon, CA, AA, NA. Like I did all these programs, and I actually always maintained one chemical program and one emotional support program.
I like
which
that,
kept me, like, when I would have the thought, I'm going to relapse in the chemicals, I still went to this other program. When I thought I'm going to relapse in my, you know, behavioral addictions, I stayed in, so somehow I stayed balanced,
I can't tell you how many times I have behaviorally relapsed.
Exactly.
You know, for sure.
What I really had to work on, and I wonder if you guys experienced this as well, I see you have process here. I had to process the fact that I resented the fact that I couldn't drink like normal people.
Yeah.
You know?
What's normal?
Yeah, what is normal? That's a great,
normal?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I really thank you guys both for being
That's
here.
it?
Yeah, that's good. So, Mr. Devin, Mr. Glenn, I really appreciate you, and thank you very much. If you are in need of any assistance, please feel free to contact Tarzana Treatment Centers here in the Los Angeles area. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Brought to you by Tarzana Treatment Centers. You can visit our website at www.tarzanatc.org or call 1-800-996-1051.